Welcome to the Confidence Café, the podcast where I give you strategies to develop strong confidence. Hi, I'm Karina from KT Confidence Coaching, a life coach specialized in confidence building. I work with teenagers between the age of 12 and 25 to help them thrive in school, at home, and in their life in general. In this podcast, I give you all the tools, tips, and motivation necessary to increase your self-esteem and tackle down self-doubt. Now, let's get into today's episode. Welcome to the Confidence Café, your podcast to learn how to become stronger and more confident every day. Today I am very honored to host not only my friend but also a fellow coach, Nat Mcdonald. She's not only a life coach, a great life coach, but she's also a mom. She has 3 teenage boys at home, and that's what we're going to be talking about today. Hello Nat, welcome.
Hello. Thank you for having me. I'm delighted to talk to you today.
Thank you. The pleasure is all mine. Definitely happy to have you here today, to have a real mother of teen actually on the show talking about her experience. So you have 3 boys at home, right?
I do have 3 boys. I have twin boys who turned 18 in the summer.
Wow.
And then I have number 3 who is 15 and a half.
15 and a half. So you have the teenager right in the middle, and you have the young adults, let's say.
Yeah, the young adults are very interesting. Well, they're all very interesting, but yeah, that's right.
So I wanted to ask you actually, how is it to have 18-year-old boys at home, and how do you set boundaries and rules at home?
Yeah, I mean, it's a really interesting time because, as you just said then, 18, I should say my 2 18-year-olds are still in school, so they're doing their Leaving Cert in Ireland. So I think that does make a difference because fundamentally at 18 you really are on the edge of adulthood, I guess. But they're still in school and, you know, they're obviously still living in the house with the rest of the family, etc. So, yeah, it's a really interesting transition time. I think both my husband and I, you know, we're very, we're very aware that this is a critical transition in your life when you think back about your own life. You know, I think it probably starts around 15, 16. I see it in my youngest son at the moment, where you really start to become independent. But by 18, you are definitely becoming quite independent. But yet, you know, yeah, they've still got a year of school to go, and there's just you know, so much ahead of them. So, you know, your question there was on boundaries, and yeah, I think boundaries are a big part of, you know, what keeps the whole thing workable and sane. I think it's very much from their side, it's very important, but also very much from our side as parents. You know, some of the boundaries, we're always thinking about their own safety and their own well-being, obviously, but a lot of the time, and actually this comes up a lot with women I coach who are parents, a lot of the time it's our own boundaries we need to be equally aware of. But yeah, I mean, to your question, what do we think of, what do I think about, and what do my husband and I think about in terms of the boundaries at that age? I would say that, you know, there's really probably 4 or 5 key areas that we focus on that would be different, say, to the things I'd focus on with my younger son. And they're probably fairly predictable, but definitely things about, you know, when they're going out, where are they going, who are they going with, that kind of things around that. Definitely going out, where are they going, who are they going with, that kind of things around that. Definitely drinking and drugs, you know, are 2 big topics that we have to, you know, that need to be addressed. And social media, I think the social media is there all along, but it's actually probably that's starting to change a little by 18. I would probably be a little bit less concerned about that, to be honest, than I would be with the younger one. And then just finally, you know, the whole spending time with us, spending time with the family, what that looks like, and all of the kind of I guess all sounds like a lot, but the expectations around the house and how that would work.
So actually, I'd like you to give me a bit more details about, for example, you say when they are going out, where are they going, when are they coming back, who are they going out with. So how does it actually translate into a conversation with your boys?
Yeah, so if we're talking about, say, it's interesting to older ones there. So for example, with the younger ones, I would still tend to ask, definitely what time are you coming back? That would always be asked. And then I would also want to know with the younger ones, where are you going? Who are you going with? Quite often I ask that. He doesn't like that question, I have to say, but I persist nonetheless. I don't need a full inventory, but I just like a general idea, if you know what I mean. With the older ones, not so much. I mean, I think it's an interesting point that I would actually be more leaning towards at that age, just please tell me you're going out. I mean, because they're perfectly capable of going out on their own. We're lucky where we live. There's plenty of transport around. They're not reliant on me to take them anywhere. So, firstly, kind of that boundary would look a bit like, please let me know where you're going. Definitely what time you're coming back. We do mean that time, not 2 hours after that time. And then at that's probably where we leave it. I sometimes they tell me where they're going. Sometimes I ask. Sometimes they don't. Sometimes they'd just be heading off. Well, we're just going off locally or whatever. Fine. And I think that whole privacy. I think they're entitled to to a good bit of privacy at that age. And so I'd be just trying to make sure I have some a good understanding of when they're likely to be back, and try to leave it at that.
That sounds great. And I was wondering, you mentioned family time, like spending time with us, so I suppose you and your husband. And I was wondering, because we know teenagehood is that time when you just want to have nothing to do with your parents and just do your own thing. So how do you get them to actually spend time with you and your husband in a way that they enjoy themselves, and not like looking forward to be finally done, or don't spend the time on their phone like really wishing they were not there or doing something else,
Yeah. Well, I mean, I would start by saying, Karina, they don't spend a huge amount of time with us in a group doing joint activities anymore. One of the things that we've always done and we continue to do, it would be mealtime. Okay, so we have dinner every night, and most of the time they're there. The only time they wouldn't be there is if they have some kind of sport training. Okay, so there's kind of and weekends. So I'm probably talking mainly weekdays and Sundays. The expectation would be that they'd come to dinner. They seem to like us at the table at dinner, adults or children ever. So that's kind of, some of these things I think are quite interesting because, you lay your stall out early, I would say, with your kids. In fact, you lay them out with yourself as adults and your friends. I don't look at my phone when I'm out with my friends. My husband and I don't sit there with our phones, and we don't do it with our kids either. So, so that family time around the meals, I think, is a good one. And then beyond that, I would, to be honest with you, we wouldn't have that, a large number of other times where we'd all be together. Maybe when we go visit their grandmother, car journeys. We go off, on weekends away from time to time. And, so far, they're happy enough to come most of the time, but they have things that are important to them, sports, etc. And they would have an expectation, and I think rightly so, that is on that get taken into account as well.
But actually, it's funny you mentioned. Sorry, I'm losing my voice already. You mentioned dinner, and I think it's very important. Maybe because I'm Mediterranean. But for us, like having meals with the family is a very important time. It's the time when we are all sitting together and talking about our days. And you have no idea how many times when I was talking with teens during sessions, they were telling me that they were eating in their room. They were just grabbing something in the kitchen and eating in their room. They were never having dinner at the table with the family, which for me is something is missing somehow, So yeah, I'm glad they have that. I think it's a really important time of the day when you're all sitting together.
Yeah, and you know what it gives the opportunity for is to just kind of get the vibe, right? Because we're not gonna have an in-depth conversation about how somebody's feeling over dinner in front of everybody else. I mean, we might, but it's unlikely to pick up on the signals, that something might be a bit off, and it just helps you. It just gives you a chance to to kind of read the situation, read the mood.
Yeah, and you're right. That is important indeed. Yes. Okay, and another thing that I wanted to ask you more detail about was, when did they turn 18 exactly?
In the summer.
In the summer.
Yeah.
And when did you see the kind of transition to young adulthood from teenagehood?
Well, I definitely saw a big change in them over the summer, and I don't think it was just the birthday, although that contributed to it, I'm sure. I mean, a number of things happened with my guys this summer that wouldn't have happened previously. So they worked all summer, which I just think is so important, honestly, from all kinds of angles in terms of their own responsibility and everything, but also for them, because that means they now have some money of their own, and they can go on and learn all the skills around managing that, etc. So they worked all summer, and they turned 18, and we had a fairly strict rule. We had a rule about alcohol before they were 18, and we didn't encourage it. Now, I'm not so naive, but I know that, there was, I don't think the first sip of alcohol that ever passed their lip was on their 18th birthday, but, we didn't encourage it. I know different parents take, widely different views towards that, and it's a tricky one. But come 18, we really tried to transition that decision-making into their own. So yeah, I think we noticed that, and then just the third thing was we actually, I think you know this, but we were away all summer, so we went to a different part of Ireland with the kids, and they actually worked there, and that was interesting as well because they kind of, stepped up to make whole new friends. Here they're known for certain things they do. Twin one does this, twin two does this. They have their own, scene here that's kind of developed over the years, but when they're in a new environment, that was interesting as well to see them really kind of form new friendships and take responsibility for things.
Actually, adapting. I was going to say adapting to a new environment, but I suppose did they know the region at all, or it was brand new to them?
They knew they knew the physical area, but they didn't know any of the people. They were a little bit hesitant to want to go, not because they were nervous about being in a new environment, but there's this huge kind of, we're going to miss all these things going on. I mean, teenagers, I mean, they're such social animals. My kids are very, very social, and they love spending time with their friends, and I'm so glad they do. They have lovely friends, and it's all very positive. But the thought of, being separated from them for over a month, and particularly off the back of the COVID lockdowns where they, wouldn't have spent as much time with them in the months before, it didn't thrill them. But actually once they got there and, firstly earning money, having the responsibility, meeting new people, they actually loved it. They loved it. So, it turned out to be a really, really positive experience.
I'm amazed to see how sometimes, that sentence, feel the fear and do it anyway. And I love that sentence because I kind of live by it. And I like to see it in action. Like your sons kind of had that fear of having to start from scratch, making new friends, new connections. And actually, yes, they were scared, but they still did it. They went there, they found the jobs, they had the responsibilities, they made the friends, and they had a great experience out of it.
Yeah, and it's funny because in hindsight, I think one of the things, I don't know, I don't have daughters, so I can't really say is it a boys thing, a girls thing, whatever it is, but I think my own experience talking to, all the other parents I know is that they just, they just want to be busy. They like to, because we were talking to them about it at the end of the summer, you had a much better summer than you thought you were going to have. It turned out to be a great summer, and they both kind of said, yeah, if we hadn't have had the job, if we hadn't had something to do, so it's that whole kind of having a part of it's just straight up routine, but then, they enjoy it because they enjoy the responsibility, etc. And I think the other part of it, which is interesting, as you were talking earlier there, it was running through my head. Sometimes that feeling the fear, I don't think they actually had much fear at all. They were just, I actually think teenagers have that, well, I can't speak for all of them, but mine certainly have that kind of fearless streak in them that we all had when we were younger. And then as we get older, we're the ones. So in some ways, it's probably us as the parents who had more of the fear. Oh, this might happen. They might not like this. They might not, if you know what I mean. Whereas actually,
yeah,
they're fine.
Oh, it's because of my experience working with a lot of teenagers with anxiety issues. So I would have heard a lot of, oh, but this might happen, this might happen, this might happen. I was like, it's okay, try it, So, yeah, your sons don't have that, but I worked with some teenagers who had anxiety issues, so they would have to be a bit I wouldn't say pushed, but gently nudged towards trying something new.
Well, funny you say my youngest would be like that, because he will benefit in some ways from seeing the boys, because now he saw them work this summer. So then we said to him, well, next summer he'll be 16 next summer. You could do that, and he's like, yeah, I could do that. So it's like to see it first and just that extra comfort.
I understand that. Sometimes I like to see someone do something first, and then I'm like, okay, I can do it. Yeah. That depends what it is, I suppose. But actually, I remember when you mentioned at the very beginning, you said about at 16 they are independent, and then they get even more independent. And how do you notice, what independence are we talking about?
How do I notice? That's a good question. So, definitely more, less reliance on you would be the first thing. And actually, it can be a bit hard to take as a parent. Maybe by the time you've got to your youngest, you'll welcome it. But with your oldest, so less independence, by which I mean, I'm going here and I've worked out how to get there, and I'll ring you when I get there and see you later, kind of thing. You're like, oh, when I get there and see you later, kind of thing. You're like, okay. Less asking
doing?
And more, more doing. Definitely taking, parcels come through the door. Oh, you did your own shopping.
Okay. That's what it's
Yeah. And this is why the having the job, I think, is so important, because we're not talking about lots of money, but small amounts of money where they can start to do this thing. Those would be some examples.
I was more wondering, if you notice things around the house, like how they would cook their own lunch, because I suppose when they're young, you prepare their lunch and they go to school with their lunch, when they start preparing their own lunch, or when they start being in charge of keeping their room, in good order, or even doing their own laundry, stuff like that, Maybe I talk from a girl's perspective, because I was raised as a girl, and so I was raised, to learn to cook and clean and stuff, I don't know.
Yeah. Well, actually, cooking, that's a great one. So mine, I can't remember when they couldn't cook, so they'd be doing that for a while. Because one of the things that happens that anyone listening to this with boys will probably smile. You just cannot keep them fed. I cannot keep my boys fed. So, we have kind of fallen into this routine, everyone gets their own breakfast. I cook dinner. There's, arrangements for school lunch, whatever that is, but boys kind of need another meal, is what I've found, and I think a lot of parents would say the same thing. So they come home from school, they're starving. But that whole thing, my responsibility, I've got food in the fridge. Their responsibility, so they come home and they sort themselves out there, and then that leads to a discussion about cleaning up the kitchen afterwards, because it literally can look like a bombshell.
Mm-hmm.
but they know that that's part of it, so it's not just feeding yourself and walking away. So yeah, that would be, but that I would say they've been doing from 14, 13.
No,
yeah,
that's good.
Cleaning up their room, that might still, for one of them that's still coming. I'm not sure what age that's coming through, but it hasn't arrived yet. No. And yeah, clothes and washing and things like that, absolutely. I mean, I still wash for them sometimes, but I certainly wouldn't be going up their room and getting the clothes. If they're not brought down to the laundry room and they're not there, then they're going out in dirty clothes. You know, I mean, how difficult. Okay. And the same with I'm happy enough to run the machine in the day and things like that there at school, but they need to put their clothes away and they need to bring the clothes down when they want them washed. I think these are kind of they're fundamental life skills, right? You need to, yeah.
Oh, fair enough. I agree. Definitely. Okay, so you mentioned earlier that you mentioned COVID earlier, regarding them having to spend the summer away and after COVID when they didn't spend so much time with their friends in the first place. So how would you say the lockdown actually affected your boys?
Yeah, I mean, I think that the lack of social interaction, the lack of organised sports, and then obviously the schools shutting down, the three of them, I mean, as you were saying earlier, mine are quite confident. They are quite confident. But even we definitely saw it. At the beginning, one of them was quite angry. There's anger, and I think we all felt it, right? Adults as well. You're angry, but there's no one to blame. Like, it's just, that whole dealing with that. Mm-hmm. There's no one to blame. Like, it's just, that whole dealing with that and the frustration. So that definitely I saw in the older two. I would say they were frustrated. They were annoyed, but they were quite resilient. They found ways. Like I was quite surprised. One of them one day got up and ran a half marathon because he said, I just need to do something. And we were in that 5K zone, so we ran around the 5K zone. So things like that. They just needed to do something. The younger one, I think, probably was impacted more. He kind of socially, I'd say he may not be quite as socially confident, and I think time will tell. I mean, obviously here in Ireland at the moment things are pretty good. The school's back, everything's back, and things seem to have settled down again. Although I just heard here on the radio yesterday, some of the on anxiety, which I'm sure is what you're seeing. They were talking about eating disorders and things that have come through this period. And
we are while we are recording, this is the end of September, so this is the very busy period for me in terms of people reaching out to me. And I have noticed most of the requests I got from parents this month are for anxiety. So, of course, I specialize in confidence building, but healing anxiety goes hand in hand with building confidence, of course. So, yeah, loads of anxiety in teenagers at the moment, a lot of it.
I think that whole, the school cycles being impacted, and then there's always this thing about could it raise its head again? Is it over or is it not over? I mean, it's the whole... that whole what you can, as a coach, and I know that whole when you can't control something, that it's a huge driver of anxiety. And the things you can control, going back to, you can control how you spend the exercise, that what you eat, those type of things. And that's kind of where my guys went with it in the end. And that actually wasn't through me advising them that way. It's kind of naturally how they tended. I think at the end of the day, they just kind of, went to what they could do.
And actually, that's interesting. I wanted to ask you, because you are a life coach like me, and you have teenagers at home. Unlike me, I have them in my office. And I was wondering how being a life coach helps your teenagers. Like, let me rephrase that. How having a mom that is a life coach is helping your teenagers at home.
Is it? I mean, I guess it is. It's an interesting one. So I know you and I had talked about that before, and when I was thinking about it before we got on to our chat today. Where is it helping? I mean, active listening. So you know what I mean by that, but and actually I think that's a term that's fairly out there, generally understood at the moment, but what I'm talking about there is really tuning in and listening, listening, giving someone your full attention, listening for what's not said, reflecting back, summarizing. So those are techniques that would be really fundamental in coaching. And they definitely are very helpful in talking and communicating with teenagers. Communicating with teenagers. Just really being able to listen to what they're saying and try to understand what they're saying. And, in coaching, you would adopt a mindset of no judgment. Now, it's very hard with your own children because, there's a very intimate relationship there. But that trying to apply those mindsets, I think that you learn through coaching can be very helpful. The goals, I've never sat down with my kids and said, let's, what's your goal for the next 6 months or anything like that. But on the other hand, they definitely, so a good example, the two 18-year-olds are in the Leaving Cert. So they've got a goal about where they'd like to get to at the end of the Leaving Cert and what they think they might want to do beyond Leaving Cert in terms of college. So there's a goal. And we talk about what I tend to do with them is said, is get them to, or encourage them. You don't get them to do anything. Encourage them to talk to me about what their plan is for that. So for example, I've asked them, where are they with their study plan? And then they've showed me things about their study plan, and so it's that. I'm aware of it, but I wouldn't be. We certainly haven't had any kind of formal checkpoints, and I do think, from an accountability perspective, it's so important that the accountability for everything is back, or as much as possible, is back on them. Whilst of course being here to support. I think as a parent, when they're that age, especially in the Leaving Cert year, it's all about a nice environment for them, a really supportive environment for them. But, that you can't do the work for them. Obviously, exactly the same as when you're coaching adults. You can't do the work without that environment. So, yeah, and the only other one I've thought of that has, I think, been helpful is that whole inner critic idea, when you have this kind of self-criticism or, sometimes putting yourself down, these type of things. I've had a discussion with one of them about that formally at one point, and, we even talked about little techniques about how we might deal with that, and, we have a kind of a fun name for that.
Did you give it a
name? Is that George having it? Yeah, basically we named it, and it just helps so that sometimes I can then just throw it into a conversation. Is that you, or is that the name?
That's awesome. I'm going to steal that from you. I'm going to do that with my clients from now. If that's a great idea. Yeah. I never thought about that. Thank you. Yeah. I'm taking that. Okay, so fantastic. You gave us plenty of great insight on how it is to actually raise confident young adults at home. And what I wanted to ask you next is actually, so you coach adult women. And so you're doing the other work, like I coach the teenagers and you're coaching their moms. And if someone who is listening today would like to get in touch with you, how can they reach you?
Yeah. The easiest way is on my website, which is www.natmcdonald.com. I'm sure we can put a link to it. But yeah, as you said, I work with women, mainly women with families. So that was very much my story. Obviously, I have the children, but before I was coaching, I was working in senior management roles for nearly 20 years. So that would be the main type of woman I work with, and very much focused on your own well-being. And I think that whole, from the moment, your child is very young through to, an adult child, which I don't yet have. Mine are almost adults, mini adults. There's so much going on there that there's a lot of pressure. Yeah, I'm talking about on the mum now, not on children, and it really difficult. Ideal to type of things that I would be talking with women. And confidence is definitely one of them. Mum guilt is another one. Never quite feeling. When you're at work, you feel guilty about not being with the kids. When you're with the kids, you feel guilty about not giving your full time to your work. That kind of thing. Boundaries, which I think I mentioned when we were talking boundaries at the beginning. There's a lot of women who really, where does the boundary to your children, where does that end and you start? Your child's life is not your life. I mean, your child is a huge part of your life, but just trying to eke out that whole sense of you and where you want to be. So those are the type of things I spend a lot of time with women on, mainly one-to-one. Yeah, and yes, I think they do. And it's really not so much what I do. I mean, what I do is bring the space busy. It really just having the time to sit down there, for an hour and just focus on yourself. Not where does, child one need to be at 4:00 and who needs this and what does your mum need you to do and something else. I mean, just having that time for yourself, that's really what coaching for women can be about.
Well, coaching is all about finally spending time, on yourself.
Yourself.
And I'm going to put the link to your website as well as your Instagram in the description below. So you can find all the contact for Natalie in the description. Thank you so much for joining me today at the Confidence Café, Natalie. You gave us great tips and great insight into what it is like to raise with confidence some young adults at home.
Thank you for having me, Karina. It's really nice to talk to you.
Lovely. Bye.
Bye.
Thank you for listening until the end. I hope you enjoyed today's episode. You can find more resources on my website, www.qualityconfidencecoaching.ie. Please feel free to follow me on Instagram using the link in the episode's note. See you soon!